We are now 59 days away from Election Day and 3 days away from the first presidential debate between Vice President Harris and Donald Trump. Tuesday's debate will also be the first time they meet face to face. Because, you know, Donald Trump didn't support the peaceful transition of power and didn't show up to the inauguration in 2021. Harris is spending the weekend preparing for the debate in Pennsylvania. Trump spent part of his Friday attacking women who have accused him of sexual misconduct. The ex-president performed for the TV cameras at Trump Tower in New York after appealing a court decision that found him liable for sexual abuse. And while we're just under 2 months to Election Day, Americans will start casting their ballots very soon. Early voting kicks off in battleground states like Pennsylvania on September 17th. That's less than a week after the first debate. Joining us now is MSNBC political analyst Basil Schmeichel. He is a professor of practice at the School of Professional Studies at Columbia University.
Basil, welcome. We're getting a little bit into the crunch time now. Y'all feeling the groove? We got it up here. We up here in New York. Everybody's juiced up because...
Not juiced up.
We're juiced up, ready for Tuesday. How do you think this narrative that Donald Trump is putting out there, it's like, oh, who's Kamala? We don't know Kamala. She's sitting in the basement. We don't know who she is. I want to play some quick sound for you about Harris being locked in a room. And how do you think this is resonating with voters?
Now, Kamala is an unusual name, but at least you know who we're talking about. When I say Harris, nobody knows who the hell I'm talking about. They say, who is that? So maybe we'll refer to him more as Kamala. It's a little friendlier, too, but it's hard to be friendly with somebody that wants to destroy our country. She's right now practicing. Do you know that? She's in Pennsylvania, and she's practicing for the debate. She's locked herself in a room. She's got a lot to learn.
Perhaps he should lock himself in a room and learn a few things. How do you see his approach to Kamala?
The vice president.
The vice president.
The actual vice president.
Going into this this campaign.
Well, they've become more and more ad hominem, right? They're much more personal. But when you combine that with the way he's been speaking in the last week, particularly at the Economic Club of New York, he sounds more incoherent than I think we've ever heard him.
Yeah.
So it sounds desperate. It clearly sounds like he and his team know that they're behind an 8 ball, that they're kind of losing the narrative. And I think if he feels and his team feels that they can't grow their support, the best way to win is to diminish her.
Well, that's an important point.
And the way that they're doing it is by trying to tap into a sense that this woman of color is not qualified for the role, isn't smart, doesn't do her homework, isn't up to the task. We've heard that 1,000 times before, right? If you're a person of color, a very common attack by your opponent, if that person is not a person of color, is that you're not qualified. It's a very old tactic. And you could see him doubling down on that language every single time that he talks about her, not even using her name correctly, right? I mean, that's textbook for him, but it's also textbook in ways that people of color are diminished. I'm not even going to say your name. I'm not even going to give you that kind of dignity, right? So we'll see that more often. I said that when she became the nominee, his attacks were going to get pretty bad, and they are. But what I like is that they're not. I don't think they're working. They're not sticking because the enthusiasm, as you talk about, the sort of juice of these last 2 months, means that everybody feels deputized to be able to push back, and that's what we're seeing.
Yeah, and just real quick on it, because you made a really important point I don't want people to skip by, and I think it's important. Donald Trump has a ceiling.
Yep.
She does not. So he's got to bring her down to his ceiling or below, and that's what you're seeing as part of that.
Sure, don't play in the gutter, and she's not going to do it.
Right.
But don't go down there with him.
Right.
Well, but sometimes when they go low, you gotta kick them.
Absolutely right.
You gotta go toe to toe. You gotta pop them in the shin real quick, and maybe we will see that on the debate stage. I think that particularly, well, if he says the wrong name, but I think it's an opportunity. You know, he talks about her being locked away. I think she's in debate prep. and she's going to lead debate prep. I think it's really smart what they're doing. That the vice president said, nope, I don't want to be at the Naval Observatory. I want to be in Pittsburgh because that puts me in a battleground state. That puts me down the street from Philly, and it allows us to get earned media. And frankly, they have to go out. They got to get lunch somewhere. That's an off the record stop that will again create more news. Something that you said made me think about. That there's Donald Trump's strategy and then there's his campaign strategy, and I feel like that the two are not meshed because I feel like his campaign would love for him to talk about the issues. That's why they sent him to the Economic Club this week. They set up this whole thing for him to talk smart about the economy. Oh my gosh, it was gibberish. No spin. It was gibberish. Child care. We're going to pay for it with tariffs. And I was like, now, I took a little economics in school, but this is not computing, sir. He is attacking and playing on a field that I don't think his campaign would want him to play on because he is more comfortable over here in the gutter than he is over here in the issue.
No, that's right. I mean, if we were dealing with a typical candidate who has discipline and actually reads policy and is actually interested in trying to grow his support and his base and go beyond that, you would see him actually answering questions. You would see him at least attempt to describe some policy position that he would have, some vision for the future. But he doesn't do that. He doubles down on the hate and the anger. And in fact, so does his vice presidential candidate. Right. So does J.D. Vance, right? So there's so a campaign that is, and look, let's be clear about this. If Donald Trump were to ever win, his campaign or the folks that are running Project 2025, they're going to be the ones governing, not him, right? And so in some ways, he really is just a vehicle for all of the other stuff that, you know, that his campaign and his supporters want to get
But a
through.
vehicle that is aware, because I do think that allowing Donald Trump to be some passive figure, like at the end of the day, he has to sign the thing.
Oh, he does.
At the end of the day, he has to say yes. At the end of the day, he's the one that gets on the stage and attacks E. Jean Carroll and everybody else.
That's true.
It's interesting to me also that we've now hit the point where this campaign is normalizing, where it's going back to looking like a little bit more map-wise of what a campaign would have ordinarily looked like. So there was this out of Axios, Trump scaling back his campaigning in 3 states he was targeting just 6 weeks ago. Trump's campaign is placing less emphasis on New Hampshire, Minnesota, and Virginia. Instead, it's pouring resources into the blue wall states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, that are crucial to both sides' chances of victory. When I hear you talk, Basil, about the way in which he is getting in the gutter, part of that is out of desperation, which is he knows his path to victory is now narrowing.
It is narrowing. I mean, Georgia's in play, North Carolina's in play. You know, I'm getting emails that Florida's in play. Texas is a lot closer to everything. No illusions about Texas and Florida. But, you know, there are people that are actually starting to get excited that they're seeing the race get closer. If you consider the money that she's raised, that means that she can force him to spend money in places he didn't think that he needed to.
$300 million in the month of August.
Absolutely.
That's a crazy number.
I mean, it's unbelievable.
I don't want to skip the loop past Florida and Texas. So
They got Senate races.
There's important Senate races, number one. Number two, those are like, oh, we got Florida and Texas on the show. Okay, we're good on the Republican side, right? We don't think about that. If this campaign and their internal numbers are showing them that they're going to have to do a little dancing on the, look, there's no, you know, to your point, no illusions of winning Texas or Florida.
Right. But spend money.
If they got to spend money in Texas, Republicans are in Texas and Florida. My prediction about Battleground State, Texas 2028, baby, it's coming true. I'm telling you.
Texas is a New Georgia.
Right. Thank you.
That's
exactly.
Right. And, you know, look, Colin Allred and we've got Gallego in Arizona. I mean, there are Democrats that are contesting in areas that under, you know, when Biden was top of the ticket, we didn't think would be successful or at least come close. She has made the race close. The money enables her to go deeper into her base to do pull-out. That's very important since early voting's about to start. And so that makes her more viable. And when the campaign sees this, when Donald Trump sees this, he's like, I got to find a way to diminish her. And that's really the only path to victory for him. It's diminishing her. And that's why at the very beginning I said the biggest challenge that she would have as a candidate isn't going to be the map. It's not going to be Donald Trump's attacks. It's going to be people believing that this part Indian, part Jamaican woman can't win, that we can't elect a woman. If you get over that hump, then the turnout solves itself. Then the Donald Trump attacks don't hit, right? And I think that's what we're seeing. We're seeing people get over that sort of hump.
I think it's a twofer. Do I trust her?
Yeah.
And can she be president?
Yeah.
And it's a dynamic, and I appreciate you bringing it this morning, Basil. Thank you. Michael, thank you so much.
And former Governor John Kasich is joining me right now. And I should mention, he is now an esteemed MSNBC political analyst. Good to see you, Governor. What'd you think as you look back at that clip? And when you look back overall on your experience with Trump on the debate stage, can you get a sense of the tone he's going to take on Tuesday when he's debating VP Kamala Harris?
Well, first of all, I just talked to a guy today who lives up in Massachusetts, and he said, John, I've always liked you because I watched that debate, and when you didn't agree with things that were being said, you kind of made it clear, you winced, but you never lashed out and got personal. I never did. And I think, Trump was a phenomenon at the time. The media promoted him by putting him on all the time. It was just a moment in time. And when I look back on it, thank goodness I didn't get personal, because getting personal doesn't make any sense. What do I think he's going to do? If he was smart, because you asked a lot of good questions to the previous guest, he's going to ask her how she's going to pay for these programs. He's going to ask her about flip-flops, and there are a whole series of them that we saw today, I think, published in Axios, a whole number of them, and that's what he should do. But what's he going to do? Alex, who knows what he's likely to do, because he gets bored very easily. As to her, she's got to keep her cool. This is her opportunity to define herself. Look, everybody in the country knows who Trump is. So trying to introduce new evidence is kind of a waste of time, frankly, in my opinion. What she needs to do is to focus on who she is, why she has the position she has, explain what she's going to do about the economy, because you hit the nail on the head with the last guest when you said it's all about the economy. And it is all about the economy, and we'll see how she's able to present her side and whether Donald Trump can stick to the script and talk about how things were when he was president, because at that point in time, things were economically, they were rosier.
Big if. Do you want to put any money on that with me as to whether he was going to be able to stick to it, because he's not necessarily known for his discipline? So to your point, you don't think that Kamala Harris should, I'll just say, get down in the gutter, right? If he starts going really low and attacking, and you did not either. And you're right. You maintain a level of respect and dignity and all that. But look at how...
I was the last person to drop. Look, I was the last person to drop out, and I dropped out when I realized I couldn't stop him at the convention, but I just don't believe that personal insults. The issues are important. Wild suggestions need to be corrected, but getting into name calling, I just don't think it works, and I don't think she's going to do that. There's no way she's going to do that.
But does it uniquely work for Donald Trump? He always does it, and look where he is.
Yeah, but look, he lost for re-election. Okay, so let's look where he is. He has a ceiling. There's no question about it. And if the campaign was a personality versus ideology, and if the focus was on personality, he's going to lose. But I think what he has to do is to make sure that the campaign is not based on personality, but rather on issues and ideology. And if I were him, I'd say, you kind of change your position on the border, you change your position on taxes, you change your position on fracking, you change your position on these things. What the heck's that all about? Who is the real person? That's legitimate. Her response has got to be like she tried to say, she hasn't changed her values, she just has more experience, and she changed some of her positions. This is critical for her to be able to show people that she is capable of being president of the United States. She has the strength. She has the vision. That's what she has to do.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. Let's move to the new analysis from Politico, which suggests that if Republicans want to win, they need Trump to lose the election big time. Is that what you're hearing? Do Republicans, and I'm not talking about Trumpians here, I'm talking about legit Republicans of old, if they exist. Do they want Trump to lose so that they can reclaim their party? And what exactly would be the calculation? How would that work? Can the party of old be resurrected?
I don't think that they're going to have a lot of people who are going to root for somebody to lose. What they're going to root for is getting back to the roots of what it means to be a Republican. Government is a last resort, not a first resort. Low taxes, but also with low debt. I don't think Trump believes in the low debt stuff. You can see what's happened with him on debt. We also believe in fair trade and free trade. I mean, that doesn't mean, anything goes, but basically you're for trade between countries. On immigration, reasonable immigration, lawful immigration, but not no immigration. But look, at the same time, when you think about the Democratic Party, and you think about the changes that Harris is talking about, she's walking away from the hard left with what she's saying. So neither party is kind of like a box of chocolates with everything figured out. They're all trying to grope for what the future is going to be. But in terms of what happens with the Republican Party, it's inevitable that it'll change. I just don't know when that'll happen, Alex, to be honest with you.
Liz Cheney endorsed VP Harris earlier this week, and then yesterday this happened. Let's take a watch.
Dick Cheney, your father, a beloved figure among Democrats for many, many years. Do you, if you know who he will be supporting or who he'll be voting for, do you care to share with us who he might be voting for?
Dick Cheney will be voting for Kamala Harris.
What's your reaction to that endorsement? For both of them, in fact.
Well,
How important is it for the Harris campaign?
Alex, you have to agree with me. When whoever that was said, Dick Cheney, loved by many, many Democrats, when did that ever happen, Maybe today,
I think that was sarcasm. I'm just saying, but go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I didn't get it that way. I try sarcasm. It usually fails, just like it might be now. Where's the surprise? I mean, we knew she was going to endorse Harris. What I'm surprised by, to be honest with you, is it isn't a bigger splash than what I thought it would be. And maybe it's because she's going for Harris, but she wants to preserve her role in the Republican Party. I don't know. In regard to her father, I mean, he's supporting his daughter. I mean, that's the way dads can be. I mean, I support my kids, so there's no surprise to any of this. I mean, do I think it moves anything? I don't. No, I don't think so.
So give me your last word on the debate, what you expect, if you think Americans are going to come away, particularly if this is the only debate between the two, which so far it is, if they're going to come away with a clearer sense of whom they support, those that are still stuck trying to figure it out.
I don't know that it'll get decided in this one. I hope there'll be more than this one. But, Alex, the other thing is it's not so much what happens during that debate, it's the reporting afterwards. And what she needs to achieve, she needs to achieve this sense that she's got it, that she can do this job, and people can get a better sense of who she is. What he has to do is he has got to show people that he's not going to go tilting off the edge somewhere. So what do I think about it? I know it's going to be a better debate than the last one, which was just shocking. But I'm going to pay a lot of attention to it and figure out where we are when it's all said and done.
You and me both. Governor, it's so good to see you. Come see me again soon.
Alex, thank you
so much.
All right.
Both candidates hit the campaign trail this week, perhaps giving us a preview of the points that they will hit on Tuesday evening.
He plans to give billionaires massive tax cuts and to cut corporate taxes by over $1 trillion, even as they pull in record profits. And that is on top of the $2 trillion tax cut. We know how to count. We know how to count.
For 4 straight years, I fought for American workers like I would fight for my own family. I took care of our economy like I would take care of my own company.
Just a reminder, Trump's company has filed for bankruptcy 6 times. It owes $355 million plus interest and penalty fees due to a civil fraud case. And he and his sons are actually barred from doing business in the state of New York for the next 3 years. Just some clarifying context. Joining me now for some more clarifying context is Symone Sanders Townsend, co-host of The Weekend. Symone, we know that debates can have consequences, as we've seen.
Yeah, they matter.
They do matter. Do you think this debate will move the needle in this very close election?
Yes. Debates matter. Look, all these strategists out here saying debates don't really matter, they don't really move the needle. Poppycock, they're lying to you. Debates do matter. And if you don't think debates matter, a month and a half ago, Joe Biden was the Democratic nominee. And one could argue without that debate performance, we will be talking about the Biden-Harris campaign and not the Harris-Walz campaign. So given that, I think my experience with the vice president, I was a part of her debate prep team in 2020 when she did her the vice presidential debate between she and then Vice President Mike Pence. My experience with the vice president is she is definitely someone who is, you know, she preps like she would prep for a court case. She's a prosecutor. And so I think she has carried that process over that she established in the DA's office, then in the Attorney General's office, to when she was a United States Senator. She prepped for those hearings. And she brought that into definitely the campaign apparatus and in the White House when I worked for her there. So it is a process where it's, yes, this is what we believe. We know what we believe. Going through tactics and looking at how are we going to speak directly to the American people, because this is a debate very different than the last time she was on a presidential debate stage. Chief among the reason it's a one-on-one. It's she and Donald Trump. And there's no audience. And so sometimes in the debates, you say something and the audience gives you a reaction and a feedback, and the candidates feed off that. There is not that option. This is about finding those moments to look directly into the camera and speak to the people at home. And she is very good at doing that, but you're going to be standing next to a person who is not he is not well at speaking about policy in depth.
So the last time Donald Trump was on the debate stage with a woman, there was a lot of talk about, perhaps quote unquote stalking Hillary Clinton. What do you think the vibe is going to be? Like, how is he going to approach dealing with this woman on stage, his new opponent? And how is she going to respond to what can in some cases feel like intimidation from this candidate?
Well, I am quite positive that the advisors to Donald Trump have counseled him against leaving his podium.
Will he listen?
That is the question on the table. And, he hasn't listened to them thus far. They want him to talk about policy. He would rather attack the vice president on her looks or her gender, her name, right? He is not talking about policy. And when he does, it's quite jumbled. So I think that the campaign, the vice president's debate prep team has to be prepared for that moment with Donald Trump, or multiple moments when, in fact, he encroaches upon her space or, says something derogatory, mumbles under his breath. I believe that they want that conflict because it will demonstrate a very stark contrast for the American people. Donald Trump, who is acting like a bully, a child, right, attempting to intimidate the Vice President of the United States of America, and how she reacts there will make a difference. I mean, if I were advising the Vice President, which I'm not, I don't know nothing about the particulars of their debate prep. This is happening in Pittsburgh, and apparently it's going well. The streets inside tell me. If he approaches you, it is a now Donald.
Like in the club.
Like in the club. It's like a now Donald, will you please back up so I may finish answering the question?
Well, so this debate comes on the heels of some very surprising endorsements this week. So Liz Cheney, the former representative from Wyoming, has come out and said that not only is she not voting for Donald Trump, she is voting for Kamala Harris. And on the heels of that endorsement came an endorsement from Liz Cheney's father, the former vice president, Dick Cheney, who said that he too is going to be voting for Kamala Harris. Are these endorsements going to move the needle for swing voters, Republicans who are maybe waffling on the question of Donald Trump?
I think absolutely. Melissa, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, would you have
Did not have it on my bingo card.
Okay, I mean, both of the Cheneys, not only saying they're not going to vote for Donald Trump, because it is one thing to say, I'm not going to vote for Donald Trump, which frankly, that is very well within the purview of many Republicans who don't like what he's selling. I encourage them, if they don't like what he's selling, don't vote for him. But it's another thing to come out and proactively say, we are voting for Vice President Kamala Harris. We do not agree on policy, but we are voting for her because she is the better candidate for this country, given the two before us. It's about our democracy. I think that's really important. There are a lot of, I think, Republicans who are looking, Michael Steele always talks about the permission structure. There are Republicans who are looking for that permission structure. Republicans who, unlike Democratic voters, have never had to hold their nose. I think Donald Trump was the first time for many Republicans where they've had to hold their nose and vote for something. Democratic voters have to do that every single election in city council races all the way up to the presidency.
So a surprising development. Donald Trump has done a lot to appeal to black male voters, but now it seems he's going after black women voters. Say more about this. What's the strategy here, and do you think this is likely to be a winning strategy for him?
Melissa, I saw there were one of the videos that Donald Trump put out, and there were multiple black women in the video. It looked as though they were reading from a script. I'm unsure. They featured one black woman in a head wrap. I like my headscarf just as much as everybody else, but as a former campaign strategist, I would never tell you to put that in a video. Look, black women voters, as you and I both know, we've been traveling across the country on our summer girls trip, talking to black women from the cities to the suburbs and everywhere in between. And black women voters are going to be critical in this election. The margins matter now. Last election, they voted, 90% for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Election before that, 92%. So they do not have a track record of of voting for the Republican candidate. But the margins matter here. So Donald Trump, I guess, is like, I need to just see what I can do. He's not offering up any policy. And black women voters, just like the other voters out here, they would like policy.
Yeah. Again, Simone and I hit the trail this summer on a summer girls trip, and you can catch the results of that on September 29th at 9 p.m. on MSNBC with our special Black Women America, The Road to 2024. You can catch it there, and it's absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much, Simone.
Thank you. Good to see you. I would only stay late at work for you.
Only for me. Thank you.
And joining me now is our friend, Democratic Congressman from California, Robert Garcia. It's good to see you. And it is well known that you support the Harris-Walz campaign. But for those undecided voters who will be tuning in to the debate on Tuesday to inform their choices, what does Harris need to do to help them see what you see? I mean, will highlighting threats to reproductive freedom be enough?
Yeah, look, I think it's going to be a few things. I think one, obviously, I think the vice president's record on reproductive freedom is so important, in contrast to Donald Trump, who takes great pride in having the Supreme Court having overturned Roe v. Wade. He's out there and has attacked IVF. He does not support any sort of access to women's health care or expand it. And so that will be a clear contrast. We know the vice president has led on that issue. She will ensure that we protect Roe nationwide. And so that, along with issues around home ownership, supporting small businesses, which you just saw that incredible moment there in Pittsburgh. You're going to continue to see those moments where the vice president reaches out to independent voters across the swing states and talks to them about the issues they care about: reproductive choice, small business support, home ownership. Those are the things that I think people care about. They certainly care about those things in Pittsburgh and across the country as well.
Let me throw in just specifically the word, the economy. It is the most important issue for many voters on this election. So Tuesday, what specifically do voters need to hear from Harris beyond generalities about an opportunity economy? How can she clearly contrast her vision from Donald Trump's?
Well, I think there is a choice that voters are going to see. So let's start with Donald Trump. I mean, Donald Trump's whole economic policy is giving enormous tax breaks to billionaires and millionaires in this country. He has said so numerous times in public forums. He wants to give huge tax breaks to oil companies, to huge banks, to his billionaire friends. Well, at the same time, Kamala Harris is rolling out plans to support small businesses. She wants to increase the number of small businesses, tax rebates for folks that are opening up their first business. And she wants to ensure that working class and middle class families have access to home ownership, supporting first-time home buyers, making sure we're building enough homes across the country. And she also supports ensuring that we have tax cuts, but for middle class families, that middle class families and working class families actually get tax relief, not billionaires. So that is the clear contrast that we have as it relates to the economy. And the vice president will continue to support small business owners and working class people and unions across the country, while Donald Trump and its Project 2025 will do nothing but shift all power and wealth in this country to the top 1%.
Okay, but do you believe your constituents are going to be willing to foot the bill for some of Kamala Harris's proposals that may come with significant price tags, because she has yet to lay out a plan to cover many of the costs, and she's also going to need Congress's support?
Well, I think first what's really important when you look at actual the plans that are in front of us. Kamala Harris doesn't believe that we should be raising taxes on anyone that is middle-class families. And any sort of tax reform is going to happen to ensure that the top billionaires and millionaires in this country actually pay their fair share, just their fair share. She does not want to. She wants to ensure that taxes are not raised on working class people or on middle class people. That is the opposite of Donald Trump. Donald Trump wants to continue to tax everyone, increase prices. Kamala Harris has actual plans to actually stop price gouging by corporations, and that's the work that she's going to do in the weeks and months ahead, and the work as president. And as it relates to Congress, that's another important reason why we have to flip the Congress to Democratic control in the House, because Republicans, again, want to continue these huge tax breaks and giveaways to large corporations and oil companies. Democrats want the opposite. We want to help working class people across the country.
Congress, in fact, returns to Capitol Hill next week with a potential government shutdown looming for next month. Republicans' proposal unveiled yesterday pushes a funding decision until next March and then links government funding with the SAVE Act. That requires proof of citizenship to vote. So now, let's be real clear on this. It is already illegal for non-citizens to vote. So what is the point of the SAVE Act? Are Democrats ready for this fight?
I mean, this is so ridiculous. We already know that to vote in the United States, you have to be a U.S. citizen. That already is the law. And so Republicans basically just want to play political games and tie the future of our economy and real people's jobs to these horrific plans that really get us and do nothing for the actual country or for actual voting security. And let's be clear what they want to do. Shutting down the government actually impacts real people. We're talking about millions of people across the country that depend on benefits, whether it's veterans, whether it's small business owners, people that are depending on health care or treatments at their own hospital. A government shutdown impacts the entire country, not just the workers, who, by the way, most of which don't work in D.C., but work across the country in states across the nation. And so this idea of flirting with the government shutdown is dangerous. And they continue to show complete disregard for the American worker and the American public. And all they want to do is play partisan politics. And that's why it's important, which you heard Vice President Harris say just a few minutes ago in her stop in Pittsburgh, is we need to end the division. She wants to actually bring the country together, and Republicans are doing everything they can to continue to divide the country.
All right, Congressman Robert Garcia, always good to chat with you. Thank you so much. Let's bring in Meryl Cornfield, staff writer for the Washington Post. Welcome, Meryl. And I'm curious, let's get to your interpretation of that message we just played from Governor Shapiro. Is he trying to lower expectations for the vice president and then raise them for Donald Trump?
I think a lot of Democrats are concerned. I mean, obviously, after what happened with the June debate with Biden and what we saw, the aftermath of that, they're worried for what will happen with Harris. Also, this is, as you pointed out, the rules earlier, there's a debate among Democrats about having the mics turned off. That was something that Democrats afterwards, after the debate with Biden, had regretted because they had felt like audiences couldn't hear Trump cutting in and saying things during Biden's points that he was talking. So it will be an interesting dynamic to see how these rules impact Harris's performance. But I think Democrats are, as you said, lowering expectations and concerned about what the rules will mean for them.
Yeah, point on that last debate. In fact, it made him look more restrained than he otherwise normally would from past debates, as we've seen. So tell me which candidate you think has the most to lose if the debate does not go their way.
Well, Trump benefited from the debate last time. He knocked his opponent out. But this time, I've seen him speak at campaign rallies. He misses running against Biden, it seems. He talks about Biden a lot. And I'm interested to see how much he brings up someone he's not running against in this debate. And something I'm also interested in is how much Harris talks about Project 2025. It's something that Trump has said he has had no affiliation with, but I was just out on the trail this week with his VP candidate, J.D. Vance, and Vance stopped at a campaign office in Phoenix and was talking with supporters. And one of the volunteers told him, it's something we're hearing a lot from voters. Is there something we can do to combat that message? So I'm interested to see how much Harris brings that up.
Yeah, I think you and me both and a lot of other people. Let me take you back to what you said, though, about Donald Trump having knocked out Joe Biden. Was it as much that as Joe Biden, unfortunately, with the performance he did, basically taking himself out of the game?
It was interesting. You said that when the mics were muted, it seemed like Trump was more restrained. But we didn't see as many personal attacks from Trump as we have seen in past debates from him. And I don't know what this debate will bring in terms of how much he brings that out. He has said he will continue to personally attack Harris, even when he did a podcast recently with Lex Fridman, and Fridman said to him, shouldn't you be focused more on policy? He said, I feel like I should still be attacking Harris, and I'm going to relent. So I think that it advantaged him that Biden did as poorly as he did in that debate, but also his either seeming restraint or he restrained himself worked.
Well, it did. And if he restrained himself, if that was a cognizant thought of him, I think it's because he just let it all play. He did not need to jump in that manner. I think there's a very strong school of thought of that. Let me ask about early voting. As you know, it begins just over a week in some states. Your new report highlights where independent and third-party candidates will be on the ballot. How many of these candidates will be in swing state ballots, and how might that shape the election?
Well, we recently reported that RFK Jr. is trying to take himself off the ballot in battleground states, but now also red states. He is telling his supporters, don't vote for me, vote for Trump. So that is something that Trump sees as a good point for him. He's had some luck in that regard because he now sees that some of RFK's supporters will go towards him. I'm not certain that that will have as major of an impact yet. I, early on in RFK's campaign, went to rallies and talked with voters. And a lot of what I heard from voters were people who were not satisfied with either Biden or Trump. They wanted someone different. And when Kennedy spoke at these events before he endorsed Trump, obviously, he spoke a lot about how both candidates have not kept their campaign promises, and he attacked Trump a lot on that regard. So I've heard from voters at his events who said that they are not committed to voting for Trump yet, ever since Kennedy's endorsement. So I don't know that that will necessarily hurt Harris as much as Trump aides are hoping. And then on the other fronts, Jill Stein and Cornel West, they have messaged to progressives that the Biden and Harris administration have not done enough on Gaza, which has appealed to voters in, especially in Michigan. So that's one place where we've been watching closely to see will they get on the ballot. Cornel West has been in legal has had some legal issues there, but he will be getting on the ballot.
Absolutely. Okay, Meryl, thank you so much for that. And